Hi, everyone. Welcome to the How to Be Great podcast. And this is a little different today. You might be just listening via your normal devices. You might be doing your usual commute. This might be part of your exercise regime. But for some of you, you're for the first time watching us. We are now on YouTube as well as on our different audio podcast places, which means I've had to do my hair. I've had to get my wrestling shirt on. Paul, as usual, hasn't really bothered. He's wearing an ice hockey shirt again. But, I try. Just so you know that I'm doing it for you, dear listener, and now, dear viewer. But things are still the same. It's still the same format, and it's still the same two losers that are bringing the ideas to you. First of all, myself, Rob McNichol, and my old mate, he's over there, Paul Benson. How you doing, Paul?
And the beauty is, Rob, I don't have to wear any pants, even when we're doing it on the video, because that's the way it goes. So hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us again. It's a bit weird doing this podcast on the video as well. It means I actually have to look at the screen and look lively rather than be staring all over the room like I normally do.
Well, this is one of my parts of my plan, you see. And my theory is I think you're more up for the quizzes. When we do the quizzes at the weekend on a Sunday night, I think you're more up for that. You're more competitive because you're trying to beat me at that, and also the videos on. So my thinking is it's going to just raise your game.
Oh, okay.
I'm also going to be aware of the fact that I move my hands constantly, and I'm going to be doing this all the time, and that's going to get quite annoying.
Well, you'd be pleased to know. In my hallway right now, I've got a new office chair sitting ready to be assembled. So I will no longer be squeaking my way through the podcast and the quiz with this old bugger.
Not quite as squeaky as you used to be. Well, that's a good sign. For any of you that are new to this, perhaps you're new because you've come through the YouTube channel rather than the podcast. What this is all about what's our title, isn't it? How to Be Great. We look at wrestling, we analyze some quite small, nuanced aspects of the wrestling business, and we work out the greatest things. We have done already things like the greatest dropkick, the greatest opening 2 seconds of someone's theme music. We've done the greatest ladder match performer. We've done the best WrestleMania, if you count only the best 2 matches. We've done all sorts of things. In a minute, we're going to tell you what our winner was from last week's competition. But just to let you know, today in this podcast, we're going to be talking about a theme to do with The Undertaker. It's on everybody's lips at the moment. The best documentary series you've ever seen concludes this weekend. We'll tell you in a second about Hooked on Wrestling's Undertaker weekend as well. But leading into that, we've decided to pick an Undertaker topic. We're going to be talking about The Undertaker's best 5 matches, or his best matches outside of WrestleMania. Paul and I will come up with a short list of 5, and then we will put it over to you for a poll. We'll take the poll to decide authentically, unofficially, but officially, the greatest ever Undertaker match that took place somewhere other than WrestleMania. That is the topic of today's poll. That is coming shortly. But firstly, Paul, I think we need to deal with the issue from last week, which was we talked about, and we went at length as well, but we talked about who had the greatest impact on Impact. We went deep into TNA wrestling history, and we discussed the people that had been the most important to that company. Give us a little rundown of who the 5 we chose were, and indeed the results of the poll.
Yes, absolutely. So the 5 guys we chose were Hulk Hogan, Jeff Jarrett, Gail Kim, Kurt Angle, and AJ Styles.
And we should point out it wasn't necessarily for good or for bad. It didn't matter. They could have had a bad impact. They could have had a good impact. It was just how to shape the company. They were the 5 people that we came down on. If you're wondering why we left off certain people, why didn't we pick Samoa Joe? Why didn't we pick Dixie Carter? Well, listen to the podcast from last week. Our reasoning is all there. So, Paul, who's the winner?
Well, I think for the first time, Rob, we have been flummoxed by the listeners and the voters. We normally really know within, at least 2 or maybe 3 of the top contenders, and the rest are usually also rounds. We know who the winner's going to come from probably 2 or 3. This week, the guy that just squeaked onto the list won it in an absolute landslide. I think there might have been a bit of favoritism voting, but the winner with a redonkulous 66% of the votes was AJ Styles.
Wow, that's pretty high.
AJ Styles, clearly the man with the most impact on Impact. My vote, Hulk Hogan. Do you know what percentage he got?
Go on.
0. Clearly, I'm not that convincing.
Do you know what? I think a lot of that comes down to the nuance of the question. I think people will be going for who do you like best in TNA? Do you know what I mean? I think that's kind of how that will be interpreted a little bit. In a few podcasts time, and it's quite a long way down the list in terms of our when we actually get to it. It may even be December. I'm not sure. But we will be doing at some point a podcast about ECW. Basically, the question being, who is Mr. ECW? Who most represents ECW? And I think that's going to be an interesting one because, again, we're not asking who's your favourite, but you could easily start rattling through people who you would most associate with that company. So that might be more of the thing that we were looking for. But I think that's what people have done here. I think they have interpreted it as, who do you most associate with TNA and who do you think as being the best thing to do with TNA? And I think they've gone for AJ Styles. On that front, I think that's hard to argue with. I think people's interpretation has been key here.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when you talk of what good has come from TNA, AJ Styles is probably number one on your list. So, and you know, he's most prominent of the guys still. I would say of those 5 guys on the list, he's the one that's there now. He's got the Intercontinental title on his around his waist. In fact, won it as the podcast went out, basically. So, not a massive surprise in recency bias terms, but yeah, first time we've been flummoxed, mate. First time one of our choices failed to make the grade.
Well, I think that, again, if you said the other 4 people, I think people would most associate Gail Kim with TNA. However, she was with WWE first. Jarrett, Hogan, Angle, do you know what I'm saying? They were WWE first before they were TNA, you know, and unless you count things such as, you know, the dying days of WCW or NWA Wildfire, then other than that, AJ Styles is a TNA guy, isn't he? So in the same way that however much longer Bubba Ray Dudley or the Dudley Boys were in TNA and WWE for longer, they're still ECW guys. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think AJ Styles will always be the TNA guy. So I think that's why he's won the sort of Mr. TNA crown, as it were. Well, fittingly, because AJ Styles, he was very possibly the last ever opponent for The Undertaker. There is speculation rife that when we finally watch the final part of the Last Ride documentary, it will be all about the last ride. It's called Revelation. Is the revelation going to be that The Undertaker has officially retired, as he called it a day on the Boneyard match? Who knows? Anyway, today's topic is going to be all Undertaker based. We will get onto that shortly. But first of all, Paul, we do need to talk about the fact that on hookedonwrestling.co.uk, starting from Friday, it is Undertaker weekend. I can't wait to share some of the content we've got with everybody.
Absolutely. So if you're reading this on the 19th, the 20th, or the 21st of June, 2020, did I say reading? I meant listening. Whatever. You're in the midst of Undertaker weekend. If you listened to it before then it's Undertaker weekend coming up this weekend. But essentially what that means, we are turning our website, we are turning all our social media over to The Undertaker. So breaking news.
We're turning it black and purple.
We are turning it black and purple, literally. So all our features, all our podcasts, all our quizzes, all our content will be all Undertaker all weekend. So if you are not a fan of the Dead Man, I would find another website for the weekend. I would find another place to consume your content, because we're going thick and fast on The Undertaker. It's as you said, Rob, it's the last episode of the amazing Last Ride this weekend. And I am convinced, and I am not alone in this, that the big revelation teased in the title is going to be that The Undertaker has officially retired. I think it's either that or his last match is going to be ... You know, potentially, yeah.
Because to me, if you're going to do that retirement, here's the thing. Wrestling is all about, I mean, what if we've learned nothing else from watching this documentary, we have learned what a brilliant company man Taker is. You know, however many talking heads there have been with, say, Michelle McCool, his wife, what does she say the most often? She says, if Vince calls, he'll be there. To me, everything in wrestling is all done to try and sell tickets. It's all trying to sell, get butts in seats. It's to get people watching online, to buy pay-per-views, to spend money with the company, essentially. And to me, if you just come and go, that's it, he's retired, I'd be surprised. I think they might say, okay, we have officially made the decision. His last match will be at next year's WrestleMania, or maybe even at SummerSlam. But to me, you retire at Mania. So Undertaker goes into the Hall of Fame. He wrestles his last match, very much like Ric Flair.
Yeah.
You know, we have the Undertaker weekend becomes WrestleMania weekend, and you could do everything about WrestleMania could be all to do with Taker. That elevates whoever he wrestles against as well, especially if, like, say, for example, I know he's done Bray Wyatt, but say they did Undertaker versus The Fiend, for example. that's a WrestleMania kind of match, isn't it? Like that would help Bray that little bit, or whoever it might be that he wrestles. So I think it could be that, but I wouldn't lay your bet that it's the retirement admission rather than revelation.
Fair enough. Well, I think one way or another, you have to do yourself a favour. It drops at 3:00 on Sunday afternoon on the WWE Network. It's a very odd time to be premiering something, 3:00 on a Sunday, but it's been like clockwork, and I would urge you to be there moment of. No, it's like 10 a.m. in the States.
10 a.m.,
that's odd as well. So, but I would urge you to be at your screen at 3:00 on Sunday afternoon in the UK, 10:00 US time. Watch that show the moment it comes out, because spoilers are going to be involved. But I'll tell you something: if anyone's listening to this and then is planning to participate in our quiz on Sunday night, don't do so if you're not going to watch The Last Ride beforehand, because you are going to be spoiled. I'm giving you advance warning. There it is. Spoilers coming.
There is no way we're going to get through that without a spoiler or two. I think people must have worked out how to use their social media by now as far as spoilers go. If you haven't participated in that, what's Paul talking about? The quiz, Sunday night, 8 p.m. UK time, is our quiz night. We've been doing the quiz for how many weeks now? About 7 or 8, Paul? Maybe about a little bit more?
In its current form, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so it's 20 questions. Paul does 10, I do 10. People come and join in, send us your answers. We mark them up. We managed to stretch 10 minutes of entertainment over an hour and a half period, but it is quite good fun. It's more entertainment than it is a serious quiz, but it's a pretty hard quiz as well. So it'll test you. You might learn some things. You might, hopefully you'll enjoy yourself. So we'll see you for the quiz as well. And one final plug before we get onto the meat of our podcast today. This is not the only podcast in town. Paul and I have been doing the Hooked On podcast for a little while in a couple of different guises, revamped for How to Be Great for the new website. But we've brought a few other podcasts under our umbrella, as it were. Paul's going to give you a quick little rundown of what they're all about.
I am indeed. So we've got 5 podcasts at the moment, this being one of them. You're listening to it, so I'm not going to plug that one. In no particular order, we've got Because WCW, which is Dean Naas and Liam Happ looking into WCW, funnily enough, watch-alongs and dissections of various good and bad shows from WCW history with their trademark bit of humor. A few exclusive interviews thrown in there. They've had Jeff Jarrett. They've had the author of the Nitro book, Guy Evans. They've had Lady Blossom. It's a great podcast. I've seen a few people just this week tell us it's come into their rotation since it started to be on Hooked On Wrestling, which is fantastic. We've got Seconds Away, which is Stevie Knight and Rich Young, 2 veterans of the British circuit, talking to similar veterans of the British circuit, not the youngsters, some more the older, hearing the older guys, hearing some stories from the road. They might not all be the most PG stories in the world, but yeah, hopefully a bit entertaining for you. And then we've got 2 podcasts from the States. We've got Hot Tag Wrestling Podcast, which is our look at the current scene, what's been going on Raw, SmackDown, AEW this week. And then we've got 3 Beers Deep, which is basically 2 of our guys, Justin and Heather, looking at old pay-per-views and old shows through the prism of 3 beers. So a little bit buzzy on, a little bit not drunken, but certainly a little bit of a buzz going on. Maybe some silly opinions and views on there, but all worth checking out. You can get to those at hookedonwrestling.co.uk/podcasts.
Indeed, and you'll be able to see that at the bottom of the screen in just a second if Paul hits the right button, I'm sure. At any point, worth going and checking it out, making sure you subscribe to all of. There it is. Look at that. That's like magic.
Like clockwork, mate.
For those of you that are watching, all we did was change a crawler. It wasn't that exciting if you're just listening. No, actually, no, we didn't. We had a huge
wizardry
display, and this plane came through the air, trailing the URL hookedonwrestling.co.uk/podcasts. Go there right now. Right, I think it's time to start the show for real. The Undertaker. Let's call him up, shall we?
Why not?
There he is.
Everybody. Hey!
If you're actually listening and you're not watching, Mark Calloway himself has just wandered into the room, tipped his hat, and then walked away again. But we're going to talk about The Undertaker. We could talk about The Undertaker for a very, very long time. We could talk about the streak alone and talk about that for hours and hours and hours. But we're not doing WrestleMania. That's obvious. If we did the greatest Undertaker match of all time, let's face it, we're going to be doing WrestleMania 25, aren't we, with Sean? And there's going to be chat about Triple H, and there's going to be chat about Edge and whatever. But so many Undertaker great matches at WrestleMania. We've talked about them. You're going to see things about those on the website in the coming weekend. We thought we'd narrow the parameters a little bit. What is the best Undertaker match outside of WrestleMania? That is our task today, to talk about those, to narrow it down to 5 in particular. And Paul, if I may, unless you have anything else to say at the outset here, I have one that I'd like to start a discussion on. Anything to bring up before we get into the meat of what we're here for today?
Not particularly. I will say that the depth of choices is a lot more interesting than I thought. I expected us to be coming up with 3 or 4 choices and then stringing it out with a few more, but it's not the case. Mark Calloway has had a few corkers, hasn't he, outside of WrestleMania?
Well, I'll tell you what I often do. I'm just looking to when I switch my head over here, folks. It's because it's the angle that my notes are on. But I have on my screen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 10 specific matches on my shortlist, and I have another which is a broader topic, as in someone that I think we need to talk about, and I haven't necessarily got a specific match of that person in mind. So I've got at least 11 to get through, and I'm sure you've got a couple that I haven't. So there's plenty of chat. We need to get it down to 5. So I'm sure we will. Right. Here is where I want to kick things off, because if we don't mention it right from the top, it is the absolute elephant in the room. Mick Foley, Mankind, Undertaker, Hell in a Cell, discuss. I am talking about the famous one. Mick goes off the top through the announce table. Back they climb again. He chokeslammed through until the floor. Concussions, teeth hanging out of his face. People trying to patch him up. Terry Funk taking chokeslams, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
Go on. What are your thoughts before we kick off into this? Where does it stand for you?
My thoughts, as you know, echo yours, and we are going to get roasted by a certain segment of the audience for this, but that is not a wrestling match. That was a phenomenal moment, a phenomenal bump, a phenomenal angle, but as a wrestling match, there was nothing to it at all. So, if you're looking at Undertaker iconic moments, it makes the 5 unquestionably. If you're looking at Undertaker matches, it's not even in the discussion.
I agree. And I wanted to bring it up at the start. I think I knew what you were going to say, and you would know my feeling on it, such as our simpatico sometimes when it comes to these things. But there absolutely will be some of you going, oh, but it was amazing. What an unbelievable thing. And he came off the top. And certainly Paul has said in previous weeks, wrestling is not about, it's not about wrist locks into drop toe holds into whatever. It's about crowd reactions, which is why you'd have a Rock versus Hogan at WrestleMania above a Dean Malenko versus Psychosis match from WCW Nitro. However, this is different. This is very much a stunt show. But what I think we can do is I think we can find 5 matches that are great matches, and it stands up to, even if we allowed this for this topic of discussion, even if we allowed the Hell in a Cell match to be as part of the 5, I am confident that we can find 5 better. So I don't think it becomes a problem.
Because obviously, technically, it is a match. There was a bell rung and someone got pinned and win. So it's absolutely valid for the comparison, but easily we'll find 5 better matches. We might not find 5 better moments, but we'll definitely find 5 better matches. Yeah.
So apologies if that was where you were going to go with it. That would just mean what we have is we put it out to you guys to mention matches. I've got plenty of matches that people have mentioned, which we'll rattle through, as well as the ones that I've got on my shortlist. Paul and I have the prerogative of having our 5, but then it does go back over to you. So it's various levels of democracy, but we do get there in the end. But I definitely wanted to start with that, because if we don't mention it right from the very start, people are going to talk about it. So following on from that, because to me, if we were doing Undertaker's greatest rivalries, which was what I thought we could, that was originally what I was going to pitch for this particular topic. It was going to be who was Undertaker's greatest opponent rather than greatest match. What was his greatest rivalries? I personally would have Mick Foley right up there. I thought it was the turning point for Undertaker. I thought Undertaker went from the very admittedly very over, but very 2-dimensional zombie, and then Mick Foley brought out the best in him, because up until that point, Undertaker was the superhero, wasn't he? He wrestled everyone that was bigger than him or stranger than him. It was Kamala, and it was King Kong Bundy, and Giant Gonzalez and Yokozuna, or IRS, but Mabel. It was the big guy. He had to slay them all the time. And then along came Mankind, and it was this psychological threat, someone that could wrestle, someone that could take him somewhere else. And here's the other thing: Undertaker got beat. Undertaker was vulnerable. They let Mankind get inside his head. I love that to death. Forget the Hell in a Cell. That had gone by then. The great rivalry was over by then. That was just something they went back to fill a place on the card. While I believe the main event was Kane and Austin. Yeah. In terms of the original rivalry, is there a match that we can take from that? Because I'll be honest, I don't have Mick Foley versus Undertaker on my list.
No, nor do I.
Is there a particular match that stands out?
I don't think there is, in actual fact. I agree with everything you said about Mick Foley. I think he made him vulnerable. He made him human.
Human.
He brought everything out of Taker, which then allowed him to go on and do what he did afterwards with his great Mania opponents and stuff. But there's no great standout match. Maybe because they had their rivalry before Mick Foley had really found his feet in WWE. I don't know. But, there were 3 very good matches, or good matches at least. So what you got the SummerSlam match, which is the Boiler Room Brawl. You've got the Survivor Series match, which was it was the Paul Bearer in a cage, wasn't it? And then I believe you got the Buried Alive match. I'm not sure where that came on that came after the 2, didn't it?
That was towards the end. I think there's another one in there, and In Your House, which was the one where they couldn't get the flash paper to work.
Oh yeah. So whilst I think it was a phenomenal feud, and the matches did what they needed to do. They serviced the feud, but no, there's no match of the year contenders. What are you doing?
I was just playing with my settings. Carry on.
Oh, God. You can't play with yourself. You've got a camera on you.
Known that on the audio. You hadn't recorded that.
But yeah, I think there's no match that I would consider between Taker and Foley, and that is not a knock on either of them. They were brilliant together. Just match quality and exciting in-ring action wasn't part of the equation.
I think match quality was good in terms of. I think what I will say is that we're talking here. We're talking 1996, aren't we?
Yes.
That's Mankind's debut. Whether all of the matches that I've got on my list are from 1997 onwards. I don't have anything 1996 or pre. So all of the iconic early Undertaker stuff, it's iconic to his brand, to his identity, to his character. But we're talking match quality here, and it's not for a second to say it wasn't important when he wrestled Hogan or Jake Roberts or whatever. But we were talking the undead zombie trying to wrestle people. So the idea wasn't match quality until later. I think it was one of the things that Undertaker will, most credit Mick Foley for, is allowing Undertaker to be changed. And I think, again, if we were plotting the history of Undertaker, one of the most important things would be Paul Bearer leaving him, for Mick Foley, because that also became Undertaker being allowed to be human and, shedding a tear at No More Paul. And, that was a big thing in the progression of the character. But again, we're talking match quality. It's not really anything there.
No, agreed. Possibly his most important opponent, character-wise, in-ring action, not on the list.
Yeah, if it was important, importance, I think we'd be talking right up there.
Yep.
Right, I said 1997. I'm going to jump to the middle of 1997, and what I like to do on these podcasts sometimes is to try and find a match which I think is really, really, really good, or a topic of the 5 which is really, really good. And I think some will get above it, and I think some will be below it. It's kind of our benchmark. Can we get 5 to beat this? And I am going to put up, which I think is the first great Undertaker singles match. And when I say that, I mean 1v1. And I am going to say Undertaker versus Bret Hart, SummerSlam 1997. I believe is the first great Undertaker match in a one-on-one. I think it's no surprise that it was Bret that he wrestled. Bret was the kind of person that could get those matches out of people. You had in Shawn Michaels as the referee, the twist at the finish, all of that. I think it's an exceptional match, and I think it's Undertaker's first great match.
Yeah, it was a really good match, a pivotal match in a lot of ways as well. Both in the career of the Undertaker and the other 2 guys in the ring. So Bret, his opponent, Shawn, the referee, told a brilliant story. I love it when you've got a methodical big guy dominating a sneaky, smaller heel, especially one like Bret Hart, who really knows how to play that character and really knows how to look strong, but also make sure you know that he's taking shortcuts where he can, because it makes. If you remember that match, I haven't watched this match for about 3 or 4 years, but what really struck me is how the match built to the story at the end, because obviously the story at the end was it was Taker, where it was short. Hang on, who swung the chair? It was
Sean
swung the chair, hit Taker. Yeah, that was right. Okay, but what?
And he wasn't allowed to get involved. Sean was not allowed to get involved in the match. He was. I think, wasn't it? If Bret lost, he would never wrestle in the States again.
Correct. And if Sean didn't
got involved,
call it down the middle. Yeah. So what I really liked is it built Undertaker's frustration. So, like, you got the impression very much so that one-on-one, no shenanigans, no cheating, Taker ends Bret Hart in that match. But it was constant little bits and pieces where he was winding up Shawn Michaels to distract him so he could take advantage of Undertaker. And you could feel Undertaker's frustration level rising. And that's what Bret did the best, in my opinion. You've got guys that are better at most aspects of wrestling, most individual aspects of wrestling. You can find guys that are better. The one thing I think Bret does better than anybody else is tell a coherent building story between those ropes. And that is what he did. He led that match, presumably as the ring general, to a conclusion. They knew that they had to get to a point where Undertaker was so pissed off and so angry that this finish made sense, especially what was going to come afterwards with his feud with Shawn Michaels. And they did it perfectly. I thought it was a wonderful match. I disagree slightly that it was Undertaker's first great singles match. I think he had 3 excellent matches on pay-per-view that summer. And that was the second of the 3. But it was a very, very, very good match, and definitely one I'd like to put forward.
Okay, well, I think I might know where you're going with the other one. I'll address it in a minute. The funny thing is, when you started talking about that and said Undertaker is the big dominant force and Bret as the sneaky heel, I instinctively went, Bret wasn't a heel in that match. Bret wasn't a heel. And of course, I remember that's during 1997. I can't associate Bret Hart as a heel. It doesn't compute with my brain. To me, the Hart Foundations were the baby faces. Austin was a heel. Michaels was a heel.
Wow.
LOD were a heel. Goldust was a heel. I was so firmly a Bret Hart and ergo Davey and Owen and so forth guy. I was such a staunch. To me, anywhere outside of America, the Hart Foundations were baby faces.
Oh, I was very anti Hart Foundation. I thought they were the heels all the way through for me, and I loved it.
You've always been a bit of a closet yank, though, haven't you? You've always look at you with your jersey on now, giving it.
Yeah, guilty, mate, guilty.
That's always been you. Although I choose to think that the reason you're wearing your New York Rangers ice hockey shirt today is in honor of the great Ted Irvin, who used to play for the New York Rangers, didn't he, in Madison Square Garden? Father of Chris Jericho, who there's a rather excellent piece just on the Hooked on Wrestling website about, which is the third part of the Barbershop trilogy. I assume that's where you've got that one from. But
that's totally it.
We'll plug that later. Okay, what's your other match that you're talking about in 1997? I think I know what you mean. I have got one on my list. I have got one that is pre-SummerSlam. It's not a 1v1, which is why I didn't mention it first. But
okay.
Is it the same one that we're thinking of? What are you?
I'm not sure. So the first one I've gone is one-on-one. It's I do know what you're thinking actually. It's just twigged, but no, the one I'm thinking of is just a month before. The first one, a month before, Canadian Stampede against Vader.
Oh, okay.
The world title match against Vader. Superb. There's no bells, no whistles. Not a huge amount to say, really, in terms of analysis. Just a really good big man world title match. It was for the belt. Both guys were going for the belt, and it's just a really good match. And on a similar vein, the third part of that sort of trilogy of summer matches was the rematch with Bret Hart at One Night Only.
I don't know if you saw that
in Birmingham. A bit of an underappreciated classic, really. I'm sure most people have seen it, but maybe not remembered it because it was kind of just a throwaway world title match on the undercard of a British pay-per-view. So it's not exactly high profile, but it was brilliant. It was so good. You had Taker as the chasing the champ, Bret instead. And again, the frustrations came out. He was winning and he was dominating until Bret Hart got him to lose his cool. And then he he took him out. He found a way to win. And again, just a really good character-driven in-ring match. I'm not so sure I'd have it on my final 5, but absolutely, well, just shows how good Taker was in 1997. You're going to talk about the Final 4 match he had in February. There's the Stone Cold Steve Austin match right after WrestleMania. There was that wonderful 5-star classic at WrestleMania 13 against Psycho Sid in the main event. When a match is more famous for one of the participating shitting themselves, you're probably not putting it on any best match lists. But yeah, just an all-round tremendous 1997 he had, really.
Yes, I had missed off the WrestleMania 13 match. It slapped my hand for not remembering that one, but I didn't have that. Yeah, I did want to mention the Final 4. I wouldn't have Final 4 above Taker Brett from SummerSlam. I personally wouldn't put any of the ones that you mentioned above Taker Brett from SummerSlam, but they're very, very fair ones to chuck into the mix here.
I do agree.
I think we're more talking about you're more talking about the broader question of Undertaker starting to have good matches, aren't you, rather than them being higher up on the list. But yeah, Final 4 I've got written down, and I think it's been one of those matches that's been forgotten for a long time. And then I think a lot of people have started to. It's something in horse racing, which is something I follow a lot. You'll often get something which is referred to as the wise guy horse. So it might be a horse that's sort of 6 or 7 to 1 that someone goes, actually, if you look at his form, he's beaten that horse and he came second in that race and he did this. But you get lots and lots of people start to say it, and then suddenly that horse contracts down to 3 or 4 to 1, and it no longer becomes the clever wise guy pick because there's so many people picking it. And I think Final 4 has stopped being underrated because lots of people are now saying it's underrated, so much to the point where it is, well, rated, yeah. But it is a good match. It's a very, very good match. There's an argument to say it's the first good multi-man match in WWE. I think we've talked about that before. How many matches that were more than just one-on-one? I can't even think of too many triple threats before then. But this is a 4-person match. I think it was even an elimination match, wasn't it? They went down to 2. So
it was
a very, very different match for the era, but beautifully conceived, really well put together. And again, by 4. You would imagine, wouldn't you? You got 4 very, very strong talents in there with Brett, Undertaker, Vader, and Stone Cold. So, a great mix of people. How high would you think you would have Final 4? Is that going to be a contender, or is it just going to be one of those ones that's pretty good but not quite good enough?
It's hard to say. We'll see where it lands, but I think it definitely deserves putting on the list. It might get knocked off. I think it slightly loses points in that it is a 4-man match because in broad sense, Taker can only take 25% of the credit, and that seems a bit silly. But if you're allowing multi-man matches that Taker was a part of, again, I'm probably taking it to the extreme, but I would stick Royal Rumble 1992 on the list if we were to do that. And I'm not saying for 1 second that he had as big a part to play in the Royal Rumble 92 as he did in the Final 4, but he certainly wasn't the man. That wasn't his match. He played a part in that match, but it was a role and it wasn't to highlight him. So when you're talking about Taker matches, I think that maybe suffers because I
take your point. You're sort of saying best match he was in, aren't you, there, in terms of 1992?
Yeah, exactly. He was in that match. It was a phenomenal match. It was in my top 10 matches of all time list that I put on the website the other day. But do you consider it as an Undertaker match? Of course not. Because he's one of 30 guys in there. Yeah. And I think, obviously, I'm not comparing like for like with the Final 4. But what I am saying is if that match was 4 guys built with Undertaker, as the focal point of the story, then I think it gets more consideration. As it were, Vader and Taker were making up the numbers, as it were. It was about Brett and Austin. So it's their match with Taker and Vader playing roles. So I think for that reason, I wouldn't put it on this specific list as highly as you would, general greatest match list, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Okay, I'll tell you what, then let's go there. It's a match that I wasn't going to go to just yet, but since you brought up, rather unexpectedly, 1992, I'm going to take us forward to 2007.
Okay.
Undertaker wins the Royal Rumble. Where does that fit in? It's a good Rumble. There's plenty going on in it. And not only that, it's, I think, undoubtedly the best final 10 or 15 minutes of a
Well-
Royal Rumble, because what essentially happened is 28 other guys did their bit and got out of the way, and an Undertaker and Shawn had a match.
Yeah,
You know,
I was going to say, yeah.
I mean, it was
That's a
however
different
many
story,
years
isn't it?
before. It was 2 years before their Mania match? It would have been 2009, wouldn't it? The Mania
Yeah.
match. So it's 2 and a bit years before they wrestled at WrestleMania. But it's a little precursor. If you don't remember it, go back and watch it. I'm sure they go at least 10 or 12 minutes, just the two of them. Almost a one-on-one over-the-top contest, which obviously Undertaker prevails in. So a Royal Rumble,
yeah, sorry, go on.
a Royal Rumble wouldn't necessarily be, off of this list. I take your point about 1992 because it's not about him, but 2007 is about him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's certainly about him and Shawn.
Yeah.
Is it there for consideration? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say by that very same logic, it was about him. It was a good Rumble. It was better for those last two. It really was just to do something different, wasn't it? The whole setup for the Rumble was, like you said, get 28 guys out there and let's have a match. We'd never seen that before, and I don't think we've seen it since. Really? I don't think it's that great. I think it's really, really good. But if we're talking, is it a pivotal Undertaker match? Would it be part of an Undertaker list? I think it qualifies more than the other two matches you've just mentioned. Whether it gets there on quality, I don't know. I'll be honest, I haven't seen it for a while, so I can't remember. I wasn't expecting you to mention that, but it was about him, and that does make a big difference when you're looking at great career matches.
Okay, well, since we've done quite a bit of 1997, it seems right to round that off, and I think probably the first lock, if you want to call it that, of this discussion. We've already talked about one Hell in a Cell thing with Mankind coming off the top, but for everything that happened in the very first Hell in a Cell match, I think that's the kind of match where if Michaels hadn't have come off the side of the cage through the table, if Kane hadn't have come out and pulled the door off at the end and done what he did, it still would have been a great match. It still would have been an all-time classic. Those extra things lodge in the memory, but if you just go and watch, it's essentially half an hour of the two of them having a ball, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's they're clearly having a wonderful time with a match type that has never ever been done before, aren't they? They are the possibilities in that cell when you know what it's like now. You've got to do so much to stand out in a Hell in a Cell match, to the point that most don't even bother. How many Hell in a Cell matches now are just matches that happen to be surrounded by the steel? Way too many. But back then it was their playground and they used it so well. And it was a storming match. Yeah, the angle at the end, if anything, takes away from it. As a match, it doesn't really. Would be massively picky to say that because it was an important part of the story, and we're not that nerdish. But it was a wonderful match.
I actually, on this occasion, I don't think it takes away because it plays into Shawn's character of getting away with it. Undertaker can't get to Shawn in this whole run. Undertaker can't get to him. He can beat him up, but Shawn prevails always. And it happens again at the Rumble because Kane has his mates come out and, oh, sorry, what am I talking about? Shawn has his mates come out and try and beat Undertaker up like Yoko did. And then Kane makes the save, but then puts Undertaker in the coffin, sets it on fire. So Undertaker never got to Shawn. That's kind of the whole point of that story. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so Kane coming out at the end actually helps it. The one match that I always come back to, and you know this, the match that I always come back to where the end ruins it is the main event of WrestleMania 17. I can't put Rock Austin as the best of their three matches at 17. It's probably technically the best match up until the end, but I hate the finish. I think it doesn't make any sense. It's not satisfying. It didn't work. And so grading it through history, I have to grade that down because I think it's a bad finish. And the finish is the most important part of a wrestling match. So if you don't get it right, then, one of the reasons Bret and Austin is one of the greatest matches of all time is because of the finish.
Yes.
The match, the build up the match is great, but that finish is so different. The sharpshooter, the blood, Austin passing out but not giving up, Shamrock getting involved. That is the match.
Yeah.
Everything else is foreplay, but that's the match. And so many other matches do have lots of great stuff. But then I have to take stuff off for someone holding onto the ropes or someone else interfering because it does change how pure it is. Yes, it makes me a nerd. Yes, it makes me a geek, but I don't care. That's what we're grading stuff on. But on this occasion, the enormous shock of Kane coming out and what he did to the match, it doesn't actually harm it.
No,
It doesn't, because
what I mean.
you have to look at it in history. In history, Kane got over. Michaels was over. It furthered the storyline. It helped everyone's character. It helped Hell in the Cell. It's okay. Wrestling is not two men pretend to fight for 25 minutes and then one beats the other. It is reactions. It is story. It is everything. But in terms of matches, I do think having a credible ending usually is important. This is the exception that proves the rule.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, this goes on the list, doesn't it? There's not really much argument that this is going into 5. The only debate is whereabouts in the 5 it is.
Mm-hmm.
A phenomenal match.
Right. Is it time to bring out the big guns?
Yeah,
Is it time to discuss one of Undertaker's greatest ever opponents, one of the most naturally talented men ever to step in a wrestling ring? There he is. Look, there's the big guy. For those of you that are watching, who's that, Paul?
That's El Gigante!
There he is against Undertaker. Look at them. Look at them facing off there.
I love these wrestling figures. I didn't know you had all these figures that you keep bringing out.
I've got lots of them. We'll have a special one day about the figures. But that's
awesome.
Is my El Gigante figure, which the commentators in WCW never said right. They called him Elegante, which is essentially Spanish for elegant, which he bloody was not. But El Gigante, meaning the giant, which...
did I get it right then, or did I get it wrong?
You were close. But to be fair to you, you said it very much like they used to say in WCW, which is not really right. But anyway, I'm only joking, folks. I don't really want to discuss Giant Gonzalez, although I did think that was a funny moment. Did you notice in the 4th episode of the Undertaker documentary when Taker was talking
Giant
about
Gonzalez
one more match,
Jr.
and Vince said he'd found Giant Gonzalez Jr.
Brilliant.
Best moments of Vince showing humour I've ever seen.
Absolutely loved it.
Right, okay, where will we go next? Funnily enough, I've got matches from 1997, and then my next couple of matches are from 5 years later. I don't have anything in 98, 99, 2000, 2001. Now, there is an era.
Okay.
There's an era of WWE which is undoubtedly the most successful ever, which is 98, 99, 2000. I don't think anyone would disagree with me that the most financially successful, financially, ratings, merchandise, ticket sales, most over Superstar Austin is those 3 years. But you do really, really well to find great matches from that era. It wasn't about matches. It was about story. It was about character. There was some good matches in there, don't get me wrong. But the greatest matches of all time didn't take place in the greatest era of all time. It's just the way things were. But my next trip is to 2002. So what I'm saying is if you have anything in between that you would like to offer, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, there's a couple. Actually. One that's maybe one that's given too much credit and one that's not given enough. The one that's given maybe too much, I think, is the main event of SummerSlam 1998 against Steve Austin.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you. Yeah,
very good match indeed. No complaints about it. Obviously they maybe didn't quite reach the heights because of Austin getting knocked silly when Taker put him through the announce table fairly early on. But it's still an excellent match between two guys who really wanted to beat the living daylights out of each other. But the other one, my look at me how cool and hipster I am, is from very late 2001. I believe Vengeance in December. It was the hardcore title match against Rob Van Dam.
I'm aware of the one you mean.
Just after he turned heel. It was hands down the best hardcore title match. That's like, Tallest Dwarf and all that. But it was a really, really good match. Taker really coming into his own as that big, nasty heel with Rob Van Dam throwing everything at him and getting swatted. Brilliant match. Really unique. A unique match, a unique presentation, and a new way of looking at Taker. I loved it. It's not on the 5, but I didn't want it to go unmentioned. No,
it's a fair point. I'm sure someone mentioned that. I'm just going to try and quickly look at the responses that we have. I think someone mentioned that when we we put it out for responses. I'm just flicking through. We did have a hell of a lot of
we did indeed
suggestions this week, and so including a few people go ha ha ha. Yes, the matches with Yokozuna, brilliant, and the matches they had in Saudi Arabia with Goldberg and with DX, ha ha ha. But well, I can't find it, but I'm sure someone mentioned that match. I would almost put that in. Here's the first big football reference of the week. I would suggest that it is a bit like being the best player in the championship, that match. I think because the hardcore title matches generally were just what they were, just full of smoke and mirrors. The fact that it was something different and it was fun and it involved Taker, who you wouldn't expect to be there, I think it kind of goes into that category of it's great because you weren't expecting it to be great. Do you know what I mean? It's like if it had been just a match that the two of them had, you'd go, that's pretty good. But the very fact that it's a bit forgotten suggests that it didn't resonate with enough people, possibly because it was on a bit of a B pay-per-view, possibly because Van Dam was kind of in a strange place at that point. He was very, very, very beloved by ECW fans, but hadn't really, really cottoned on yet in WWE. He wasn't far away from being so, but did you see what I mean by that? I think it just falls into a little bit of a hinterland. It's a good point. I hadn't thought, well, I did think of it when I was going through his matches over the last couple of days and doing some prep, but I didn't think to put it on my list. But I do think it's one that is worth a mention.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, look at that. Just as we're talking, I've had the preview clip from The Last Ride, Chapter 5, come into my inbox from WWE. Isn't that nice?
Stuff. Expect that. So by the time this podcast goes live, you'll be able to see a nice preview clip of that one on hookedonwrestling.co.uk and no doubt through our social media channels, which will probably appear on one of those little things at the bottom of the screen at some point during this pod.
I'm sure they will.
Right, let's move to 2002, where I've got 3 matches down. I'm not absolutely certain of the complete order of play in terms of which was before the others, but I'll start. Well, I know 2 of them were together. I'll start with one of those. Let's start with a match that was mentioned on this podcast a few weeks ago, because when we discussed the greatest ladder match performers, that particular poll was won by Jeff Hardy. And in the Jeff Hardy chat, we very much brought up the match he had with The Undertaker on Raw. I can tell you it was July the 1st, 2002. It was Jeff Hardy versus Undertaker for the world title. Or the Undisputed title, whatever it was called at the time. It was hanging from the ceiling in a ladder match on Raw, no less, not on a pay-per-view, on Raw. And it essentially was an Undertaker babyface turn. At that point, Undertaker was, even at the start of that, I actually watched this match last night, and Undertaker at the start of it is being described as the most evil presence we've ever seen in this company by Jim Ross, etc. By the end of it, he's shaking Jeff Hardy's hand, raising his arm, shaking his head as if to say, you are, one tough, son of an unnamed goat, as Roddy Piper used to say. It's a great match. It really is a great match. And it's what you're talking about in terms of emotion. The crowd wanted Jeff to win so badly. They were so with Jeff. Undertaker made Jeff Hardy that night. What do you think? Is it in the shake-up?
Mate, it absolutely is. To be honest, everything I said about the Rob Van Dam match applies to this one, but to a greater degree. It was a better match. There was more accomplished by the match, and I think to me this goes on the 5. Actually, I might be talked out of it later on, but this was a truly great match that also was pivotal to the careers of both men, and is remembered phenomenally well to this day as one of the top matches in Raw history. So, yeah, there's no reason not to put this in pencil, at least on the list. Great match.
This once again plays into my thought of having a match is great. And I was going to say anyone can have a good match. That's not true.
No.
But most people can, put together a very good match. And the top wrestlers in the world you can just stick them together and they can have a great match. But when there's something on it and when it achieves something, so this, there was a title at stake here, and what it did for Jeff and what it did for Taker, because it changed Taker's character and allowed him to be a bit more of the, I was going to say elder statesman, and I realised it was 18 years ago, and he's still going. But that sort of, that sort of absolute stalwart cornerstone figure. And so, for what happened shortly afterwards, which is what I'm going to talk about next, it became more important for that. So I think that ladder match achieved more than just being an entertaining, 17, 18-minute match or whatever it was. Had both guys being a babyface and it had no titles on the line, and they had exactly the same match move for move, I wouldn't include it. I wouldn't include it. It's all about context. 20 days later,
right,
at the Vengeance 2002 pay-per-view, the Undertaker had a match with Kurt Angle and The Rock in a triple threat.
Was that only 20 days
20
later?
days after the match with Jeff
Wow.
Hardy. It was that soon after. And so it sent Undertaker into it. The dynamics of the people in that match are very interesting because Kurt's one of those guys that people have always respected. They boo because they should, but they respect him. Rock, superstar, main guy around at the time. No Austin at this point. Rock is being, absolutely hailed. But he's just getting into his Hollywood stuff. Shortly afterwards, by the summer, or by the following month, we'd be seeing the Rock-Brock thing, and Rock was getting booed. So Rock's in transition. And then you've got Undertaker, heel up until 3 weeks earlier, babyface against Jeff Hardy. We go into this triple threat, which The Rock wins and wins the belt before going to lose to Brock Lesnar. Again, this is one I watched last night. It is an unbelievably good match. And again, as a three-way, when you talk the greatest three-ways of all time, lots of things come up, and I don't think this one always does. But again, from watching it last night, recency bias you talked about earlier on in terms of AJ Styles, I have seen this match within the last 23 hours. But goodness me, it's good. It is, of all the matches that we've spoken about so far, it's probably the best pure wrestling match.
Yeah, agreed. It's arguably the best triple threat match ever. There's a lot of good competition, obviously, but it's really, really good. There's not much more to add. I'm waffling a bit compared to what you've said because you've said everything I wanted to, but it's brilliant. Like there's just, and all three guys play an equal part, which is the key thing. There's, the stories intertwine, the action. There's no standout star. Obviously, The Rock wins, and the whole idea is to get the belt onto Rock in time for SummerSlam. Yep, I think we've got another contender here.
Yeah, I'm just looking to decide. I'm just looking to see who suggested it. James Billington was one. Another one that comes to me here, Richard Howson. His words: the triple threat with Rock and Angle was very, very good indeed. I remember the fans were kept on their toes throughout. Lots of believable false finishes, pin breakups due to the triple threat. Perhaps too much theft of signature moves, but I will forgive it. Yeah, that's the match. Undertaker did an Olympic slam on Kurt Angle in that match. Absolutely amazing. And so that's one. And Ethan also loved the promo package, which featured the song Downfall, which served as the pay-per-view theme. So it was something that he brought up. And he also says that there was a match on SmackDown not long before that where Undertaker defended the title and tapped out to Angle, putting him in the triangle as Angle got pinned at the same time. So yeah, that was just before, and it's the reason that Angle got added to that match. They worked to a draw, basically. But it's all, again, interesting historically to see that it was Angle that had Undertaker in what became known as the Hell's Gate.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure Undertaker had used it at that point. Undertaker seemed to use it after that point, which is an interesting historical point.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, absolutely on there. On the money, mate.
Okay, so I wanted to do another match in 2002, but this is also going to bring us on to a more general topic of the opponent. I've got down here as a match from No Mercy 2002, Undertaker versus Brock Lesnar. Hell in a Cell again. But it's fair to point out Undertaker and Brock Lesnar have had lots of matches. Clearly, we're not including the one from where the streak was broken, because that's a WrestleMania match, but they have had matches around the era of 2002. They also had other matches after the streak being broken. Let's talk about Lesnar as a collective, as an Undertaker opponent. And would you agree that of all the matches to pick out, No Mercy is the one? Do you have an alternative, perhaps one from the more recent matches?
No. No Mercy is the one. There's 4 high-profile matches, I think, between the two of them. There's 2 in 2002. And then there's the WrestleMania 30 and the subsequent Hell in a Cell match. I don't think there's any more. All very good. The WrestleMania 30 match is not so much a good match, but obviously a hugely important moment. But the 2002 match were better. You've got that newly-ish turned babyface Undertaker, the whole big red respect type character coming up against the brash, young, powerful upstart Brock Lesnar, who's just won the world title in his rookie year. Taker wants to beat some respect into him, but he can't, because Lesnar is the better man. I think it did absolute wonders for Brock Lesnar. In fact, I would go as far as to say Undertaker has made Brock Lesnar twice. So whilst Lesnar was obviously a big deal in 2002, he'd beaten The Rock at SummerSlam in dominant fashion. He'd beaten Hulk Hogan. He'd obviously laid waste to the undercard. The matches against Taker, in my mind, just put him right over the top. It was the way that the veteran anointed him the next guy, the next big thing. I've realised I'm using his nickname there. I didn't really mean to, but I think it's so important to get that seal of approval, not by beating Taker once, but by beating Taker twice in quick succession. He did that, and then again in 2014, when Brock Lesnar came back, he was not that impressive. Like, he lost to Cena, he lost to Triple H. He was very, very much in danger of just being a guy. Did you think he was going to beat Taker at WrestleMania 30?
No. I did podcast over podcast saying I didn't like the build to this match because it was so obvious that Undertaker was going to win.
Yeah,
Undertaker's not going to. He's not going to lose to someone like Brock Lesnar because we don't know when Brock Lesnar is going to disappear. Don't forget, Brock Lesnar came back in like 2012.
12, yeah.
And at the time, we thought he'd be back for a year, maybe two.
Yeah.
Like no one suspected. We thought it was going to be a Goldberg run back for a year. We thought it was going to be a Batista run in and out. It's 8 years on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's still around. Okay, he's not around every week, and I know people get frustrated of him not being on the card all the time. But it's been 8 years since he came back. That's an astonishing amount of time. And so it was only a couple of years after that, which was the streak breaking, and I was basically at the point of thinking, Brock's probably going to do. That's probably him done. I thought it was going to be a Ronda Rousey run. That subsequently happened. That's what I expected to happen with Brock, and so I know I didn't expect it for in the slightest. But while on that, both in terms of the streak and in terms of the 2002 stuff, I'll even include a little bit of 2003, which it was 2003 when Brock won the Rumble, right?
Yes.
So I would include that in Undertaker helping to make him, because Undertaker being last to get thrown out, and he came back into the ring, remember, and he said to point it at Brock and did the strap motion. You better go and win the belt. Yeah. All of this, in particular the match against No Mercy, which is the one we're focusing on, is it a good match? Is it a great match? Or is it just good booking? In our minds, are we going, is it a great moment? I know that the blood stuff was as much with Hogan as anything else, but I still think of how bloody that match was and how dominant he feels over Undertaker. But is it good booking and good iconography as opposed to a really great match? I have to confess, I wanted to go and watch this match yesterday and I sort of ran out of time.
I always go, as you know, to me, the mark of a good match is how it makes me feel. How I get into it, how excited I am going in is obviously a mark of a good build. How excited I am during the match and how it makes me be absorbed into the match is the most important thing for me. And I remember watching this match. I remember back watching it in 2002, and I remember being absolutely compelled. There's more than one way of having a good match. And these guys told an amazing story about the young lion withstanding absolutely everything the veteran was giving him, the bully, the boss of the yard, whatever you want to call him, and he could not be put down. And I thought it was a wonderful example of two guys going out and beating the living shit out of each other. And I like that sort of match. So I think it was a great match and great booking.
I was just checking to see how many people have gone with that one, and the one that jumps out at me on our comments here is Ryan Watson, who says, he said, I felt that they tried to ignore Undertaker versus Brock at No Mercy 2002 as if it never happened when they faced each other in the Hell in a Cell the second time. But it was that was still a great match. And William Frost is someone that agrees that was a fantastic match. Andrew Thompson as well, I agree. Brutal but great match. So several people did bring it up in the chat. There's more than just that one, but those are the ones that have jumped out at me. So I think it needs to go into our discussions. There's about 3 or 4 in the discussion so far. We've got some more to come, but I want to break off at this point. This is something we haven't done so far on the podcast. I'm excited to be able to do this. Depending on when you are listening / watching to this, we've got a little competition for you, which adds into the Undertaker theme of the weekend. I will hand over to my good pal, Paul Benson, who is going to tell you a couple of things that we've got on offer. excuse me, where you could win a competition, not just this week, but going into the weekend. Have at it, Paul.
Yeah, so we have teamed up with WWE Euroshop. I'm not going to say friends of the show because that's particularly wanky, isn't it? But we have teamed up with WWE Euroshop, who have given us some cracking Undertaker merchandise to give away. So we're going to be doing that throughout Undertaker weekend. But as you listen to this, if you listen to it when the podcast drops, we've got a competition running on our website. If you go to the news section, you'll see it pinned to the top. Dead simple, multiple choice question to enter, but you can win a snazzy Undertaker Last Ride t-shirt and an Undertaker mug. All you have to do, it takes 2 seconds, go to the website, fill it out, enter, and we'll pick the winner out of a hat on Saturday morning when we're in the midst of Undertaker weekend. So get along, hookedonwrestling.co.uk. It's there on the homepage. Just scroll down a little bit, and you're in for a win.
So what's the deadline for entering then? Is it Friday night or
Saturday midnight? Friday midnight.
So Friday 11:59 is essentially, yeah.
Yeah, which is what? What's Friday? Friday's the 19th. So yeah, Friday the 19th.
Yeah. The very, very last knockings of close of the day on the 19th. Get your entry in by then. We'll draw it out and announce it Saturday morning on the website and on the social channels. But again, as Paul says, that won't be it. There'll be other giveaways during the weekend. So just keep your eye out, basically, because we'll be telling you as you go. A massive thank you to WWE Euroshop, because these aren't some things they've had knocking around in the cupboard for a couple of years and they're trying to get shot of. This is brand new stuff. So we're really, really grateful, not only for that, but also for the exclusive video clips they've been sending us. Right, on to some other Undertaker matches from history. I'm not necessarily going to go in a particular order now. In fact, I'm going to bring up another individual. I don't have a particular match down for this individual, but I do think he needs to be discussed. I think perhaps the most surprising set of good matches, maybe great matches, that Undertaker had in his career was against Batista. I've always said that, but if you wanted to say who is Batista's biggest, most important match against, it is absolutely him beating Triple H at WrestleMania, because that made Batista. Yeah. I think Batista coasted a wee bit later on in his babyface run when he turned heel towards the end. Oh, some of the greatest stuff you've ever seen. But for a couple of years, I thought Batista was a bit of a cruising babyface. But what made him with Triple H, what started to make him was with Triple H, and what cemented him was working with Undertaker again and again and again. And they were fun matches. They were gripping. And more to the point, Batista got wins. And again, the credibility of beating Undertaker, not at Mania, admittedly, but winning it in SummerSlam. Did they have three? Did they have three matches? I want to say it was Mania, SummerSlam, and one more. I'm not sure.
I'll be honest.
Maybe it might even have been four. I guess my point is that I think the best of their matches was the WrestleMania one. And so it kind of holds me back in terms of offering something for this list. But if I watched it, I probably would think about having the SummerSlam match that they had. There was certainly a very, very good second match, whenever it was.
I'm going to sort of put my hands up and say my memory's a little bit fuzzy, and I too haven't had time to go and watch all the Batista matches. Wasn't expecting them to be brought up. So I know the WrestleMania one very well, but obviously that's not part of the conversation. So, and again, using the principle of the fact that we can't remember them, maybe they don't qualify for the top five. I thought they were very good. And I think Batista got a lot out of them, but they're not massively all-time greats.
No, I think I probably agree with you. I just wanted to bring him up as a very credible, very strong opponent. I'm actually looking. I can't see that anyone has brought him up specifically. Fun enough, one of the people in our that's made a comment is called Dave Batista. Is he really? who knows? But he's even suggested an Edge match, so it's not necessarily one to bring up. But that's again at the same time, let's bring up Edge. Is there an Undertaker Edge match that deserves to be in the chat? Because again, I think I would say that their best match was at WrestleMania. That's not what we're doing here. But what about other Undertaker Edge? You're shaking your head. You're going to say, I think you're going to say One Night Stand, are you?
No.
Oh, no. Okay, go on. No.
TLC at SummerSlam.
Okay.
Phenomenal match. Excuse me 1 second. My family are home. Hello, Samuel.
We're going to get a run-in. It's a run-in.
We're going to get Samuel running. What have we got here? Oh, a bargain. Oh, a shifty pen. We've got a shifty pen, guys. Everyone, we've got a shifty pen. Can we have a look? Can we have a look at your shifty pen?
This is a podcast extra for those watching on YouTube.
But you can stack
It's a shifty pen where you can stack the pens, apparently.
You can stack them.
You can stack the pens up.
So there's a 6-year-old boy who knows where a microphone is, ladies and gentlemen.
Right, mate. Can you close the door and lead me to it? Is that okay?
I will.
Thank you. Say bye-bye then.
Bye-bye.
There's a boy that wants the limelight. Can you close the door,
Fabulous.
mate, please? Yeah.
I've told you before. What did I say to you about watching Wrestling with Samuel? It should be a podcast. What has our editor done? What has our website editor done?
I know.
Liam is doing a podcast with his daughter. It's not necessarily about wrestling, but that was your idea was there for you, and you've not done it. So
I know. What am I doing?
You only have about 17 different jobs that you're doing at the moment, including being dad. So I'll let you off. Anyway, good of Samuel to do a little bit of a run in, but I believe we were talking about Undertaker Edge from TLC.
Yes, we were. And it was this match is thought to be the last one that marks the end of the Blood and Guts era, isn't it? The common thought is that this one was the last match before PG kicked in, and it was a big ass violent brawl. We basically got Edge destroying himself to make Undertaker look great, and he did just that. I thought it was a great feud capper. Remember, there was that whole feud, but he was basically taking on Edge and Vicky Guerrero and La Familia that summer, and this was the end of that. And it was Edge being sacrificed for our sins, and they've got great chemistry, those two, always. And obviously, as we've spoken about with Edge previously and with Undertaker today, they do these gimmick matches really well. Enjoyed it immensely, and I think it deserves to go on the list as a capper, an important match because it was the last hurrah for what WWE used to be in that period. So I'd consider it.
Okay, that is down for consideration. I had down here the match at One Night Stand was the one that I guess was the one that first came to me, but I wouldn't fight you on that. I would say it's a fair shout. I've timeline wise, I've gone past one. It might even be the last one for me to mention. I think it is the last one for me to bring up. If you've got any more, I'm happy to hear from you. I would like to say simply Undertaker, Kurt Angle, No Way Out, 2006.
Absolutely storming match. Just amazing. It was the whole idea that those two were just completely evens. They were absolute equals, and it was there by the grace of God. That was the story, wasn't it? Like, who was the better man? It was on the day. God, who won? I can't remember who won now. Was it Kurt Angle making tap out? The one time he tapped out.
No, Kurt pinned him. No, Kurt.
Was it right? Okay.
It was it was a bit of a. I can't really describe it, but I think he was. I think he might have been in the Hell's Gate, and he sort of rolled through.
Yeah, that was it.
And trapped Undertaker. It's again, it gets extra points for me for having not only a clean finish, a surprising finish, because you're probably not expecting Undertaker to just lose that way, but also an innovative one. That to me was right out of the Bret Hart playbook. Bret was amazing at finding a finish. The flip backwards finish he did with Piper, and then they recycled for Austin at Survivor Series. But the King of the Ring is a classic thing for Bret. The 3 different matches he managed to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bret was the absolute. Oh, look at the finish he did with Owen when he lost to Owen at WrestleMania. Bret could come up with a finish like nobody else. The best finish wrestler of all time, apart from Ludwig Borger. But it was something Bret was able to do, and it struck me that that Kurt learned something from that. Or I would imagine it's probably Undertaker's finish. Why don't you roll me up this way? I've always thought it showed that Undertaker had huge respect for Kurt, that they had a match in that style. That Undertaker, by the way, if Undertaker doesn't want to lose, Undertaker doesn't lose. Okay, I know he's a respected professional and would do what he's told. I know he would toe Vince's line, but let's face it, if Undertaker really doesn't want to lose to someone, he's going to go, "Come on, Vince," and he can get a finish changed. And I can't imagine Vince would just go, "You're losing clean tonight." I think there'd be a discussion. Are you happy to lose clean to Kurt Angle? Absolutely, boss. And that's what Kurt meant to that company in that era. I think this is probably my favorite of all of these matches. I think if this was a Rob chooses game, I think I would probably pick this as number one because I love a proper wrestling match. Not many of the ones that we've talked about here have nothing else going on. It's not a criticism, but we're talking Hell in a Cell matches. We're talking ladder matches, TLC matches. Okay, I don't think they've really come up in the conversation, but Undertaker has had casket matches. We're having triple threats and final fours, and we're having so many different types of match. Undertaker sometimes needs a bit of something different to add to it all, to add to the mystique. But this is a match. This is 1v1. Even the one-on-one with Brett has Shawn as the referee. But this is just two men having a wrestling match. And it's astonishingly good. This is probably the one. I know they do this on other podcasts, but if they say if you want to watch one match this week coming out of this podcast, don't go back and watch ones that you've seen lots and lots of times before. If you haven't seen this one for a little while, or perhaps you've never seen it, I urge you to go and watch this. It's just, it's almost faultless. It's a beautiful match.
It's pro wrestling at its finest. It's two great guys who clearly have the utmost respect for each other, at the top of their game, putting on a wonderful, wonderful match. I would not argue with you putting this top of the tree on this one. It might not make it for me, but it's going to be close. I think it's tremendous. Kurt Angle's my favourite of all time. You know, put him in there with a prime, motivated Undertaker. And yeah, it's stunningly good.
I think I know what will win this, but this would be my number one choice, put it that way. If I have any sway with anybody, I would say before you vote, go and watch this and seriously think about it as being a choice. Before we start to get into a few things I want to read out from social media and try and get into our top five, anything else from you, Paul, that you think I've egregiously left out? It's interesting that almost everything I had is pre-2009. I don't have anything from the last 10 years. That's possibly because almost all of Undertaker's matches have been at WrestleMania, and that doesn't fit into our bracket.
That's exactly it, isn't it?
Do you have something else to add?
No, not really. He had a period where he was just on fire, and that was around this time when he was more human. There's no, he had that sort of motivation or whatever, I don't know, or just the right opponents. As you say, since then, he's become a WrestleMania attraction primarily. And obviously some of the very best work of his career from 2009 onwards, but we can't talk about any of it in this context because it was all WrestleMania. So, no, I think we've covered absolutely every match I wanted to cover.
Any egregious omissions in terms of opponents? Obviously, we've not talked about Kane.
Kane is the one, isn't it?
I don't think anyone would really, believe that you've ever seen an all-time classic Undertaker-Kane match. I do think someone mentioned the Inferno match.
No.
Let me bring that up as a...
Cave.
Someone, Darren Robinson said Taker versus Kane Inferno match. Just seeing those two battling was awe-inspiring.
No, it wasn't.
I think that's kind of well, if he says it was, then it was to him. But I think that's
Sorry,
the thing, isn't it? Any sort of Undertaker Kane match was the I'm trying to think of the right phrase, but it was the theatre of the whole thing, wasn't it? It was the storyline and the theatre and seeing the two monsters as opposed to the the catch as catch can wrestling.
Yeah.
I would think actually if they were honest, those two. And maybe Undertaker's mentioned it on the documentary and I've forgotten it, but I don't know if they're honest. The big thing that was because if we were doing again all-time greatest iconic Undertaker opponents, you have to talk about Kane, you'd have to talk about Mankind, you'd have to talk about Batista, you'd have to be talking about, but they're not featuring on our list because the match quality, is down a wee bit. It's not quite the Shawn Michaels level, but you'd have to be talking about Kane, wouldn't you, in terms of talking about how important he was to Undertaker's career. They probably just regret that they never had a match which was the match where you go, bloody hell, that was good.
No, they never did. Obviously, the closest one was the WrestleMania match, the original match, WrestleMania 14. And that was excellent for what it was trying to do again, but it's not, doesn't hold a candle to anything we're talking about right now.
I don't think so. Right. Any more to add before I run through?
Let's narrow that list down, mate. Let's get it done.
Well, just before we do, I'm just having a little run through of some of your comments, and just to see if there was one that Jake Pugh did add as something one we've not really talked about, which was a match against Batista. A Survivor Series is one that he offered. Al Hunter says he loved Ministry Undertaker and enjoyed Stone Cold's first blood match at Fully Loaded. That was one for him. Tom Wells said, I liked how people said, no one else will suggest this, but, and someone that said, no one else will suggest this, but Bret Hart at SummerSlam was like, a few people did suggest that one. But Tom Wells said this won't be in anyone else's suggestions, but I think, I remember watching Undertaker versus JBL at SummerSlam in, I think, 2003. I just happened to watch it at age 8 or 9, and I loved it, especially seeing Taker chokeslam JBL through the roof of the limo. Maybe not the greatest match, but one that I have a personal connection to. I think that comes into it sometimes, doesn't it? The matches you remember at certain eras. I'm not disagreeing with him on that particular point. We're not going to include it on our list, but if that's the way it made you feel and it was at a certain time for you. A couple of people have mentioned the the Yokozuna casket matches, but I'm a bit sort of I'm not quite sure how tongue-in-cheek people are with it, but certainly one here of Andy Keenan seems to mention it on a genuine point. He says Taker Mankind Baller Room Brawl, also the '94 Rumble casket match and the Buried Alive matches. He's obviously very fond of the gimmickry. Richard Ryan Davis, Taker versus HBK and Taker versus Mankind Hell in the Cell matches were the best. Terry McGowan says he had a match with Ken Shamrock. Not Terry didn't. Terry might be a great wrestler, but he means Undertaker had a match with Ken Shamrock at Backlash '99 that he wants talking about. We'll see what else. Punjabi prison match, yeah, right. Any match with HBK, Mick Foley, or Triple. We didn't really talk about Triple H, but then I suppose Triple H Undertaker didn't have matches outside of Mania, did they?
It was all Mania, wasn't it? It was all Mania. Apart from the one on the stairs at Penn Street Station, where he tombstoned him on the escalator.
That's right.
Not consideration, but great fun.
Matt says for sentimental value, Undertaker Bret Hart at One Night Only. Yeah, you mentioned that, didn't you?
Yeah.
What else is there? King of the Ring. There were a fair amount of shouts for King of the Ring. We talked about Richard Howson's shout. Harry Guttridge is another one that brings up Kurt Angle's match on SmackDown. And then Graham Elsley, the 1991 Ultimate Warrior body bag match is what he says.
Okay.
I think if Ultimate Warrior is breaking into matches of top fives of this quality, then that's an interesting shout. But thank you to everyone. That's just a selection of the ones that I picked out from before. But thank you to everyone that suggested things. Please continue to do that in future weeks. But we need to get our top five sorted out. So we need to first of all, I would say, okay, are we happy with 2 or 3 of these? Absolutely, definitely going on. So I'm saying the Hell in a Cell match at Bad Blood. Yes, definitely.
Definite, yeah, of course.
The singles match against Kurt Angle, definitely.
Unquestionably, yeah.
Okay, they're the absolute 2. I think are at the top of the list.
I've got 2 more. Go on. Go ahead. Go on.
No, continue. No, you continue.
Well, the 2 more I've got on my list. The 2 others I've got on my list. I've got Taker, Angle, Rock in that Vengeance triple threat.
Agreed. I'm more than happy with that. Love that match. That's 3.
And I've got Taker, Jeff Hardy.
Okay, in the ladder. Okay. Previously, we said that the kind of gatekeeper on this would be the Undertaker versus Bret. So we've put 4 in above that. More than happy with those 4. So we have to really decide. So let's temporarily keep Bret Hart versus Taker from SummerSlam at position number 5.
Yeah.
The question is, does, for example, the 2002 match with Brock Lesnar at No Mercy get in above it? Does the TLC match with Edge get in above it? Or perhaps the final 4? They're probably the other 3 to consider. So what would you go for of all of those matches? So we're talking Brock at No Mercy, Edge TLC, Bret at SummerSlam, and the final 4.
I would keep...
Actually, we're not going to say the final 4. I think we agreed at the time the final 4 was too far down. So let's just say those other 3. Edge, Brock, Bret.
Bret.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the Brock thing is more the surroundings and what it did for Brock and the booking.
Yeah,
and I think Edge, the fact that I think Edge is a great series of matches, but I don't think to the one I picked just to do with the fact that the one I picked out was different to the one that you picked out suggests to me that they don't have a standout. In fact, if they have a standout, it's WrestleMania. And I think the fact that they had a WrestleMania match which was better than those other 2 kind of taints it in terms of this particular conversation. Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the SummerSlam match is better, but I know that's a minority opinion, so I completely get where you're coming from.
Okay. Right, so
we've got a 5. We've got a 5. That was easy. That was easy.
Easiest we've ever come to a 5. So in no particular order, because they just happen to be the order they're in on my screen to my right, we are going to say Undertaker versus The Rock and Kurt Angle, Vengeance 2002. Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, Bad Blood 1997. Undertaker versus Kurt Angle, No Way Out 2006. Undertaker versus Bret Hart, SummerSlam 1997. And Undertaker versus Jeff Hardy, Raw, July 2002 ladder match. Those are the 5. Like I said, I've read them out in the order that they're on my screen. Paul will put them up in either a chronological or alphabetical order, so we're not swaying you one way or another. That vote will be taking place, and for those of you who are watching the video, it's scrolling along now. Look, there it goes. To vote, go to hookedonwrestling.co.uk/poll. That is hookedonwrestling.co.uk/poll. Well, that is where you vote. You just go to that page, you click the one you want. It will say thank you. And then what you should do is spread the word and tell your friends to come and listen to this podcast, watch this podcast. For if you are still listening to this, you can come and watch it if you want to watch it a second time. It is essentially just me and Paul talking to one another on the screen, but it is just a way of giving you an option. And every now and again, you get me holding up a little figure like that, or Paul's son coming in and hogging the microphone. But he's still got a better microphone technique than his dad. Anything else to add to do with those 5 before we wrap up and give a little tease for next week?
No, I think, considering the quality is so high, I'm surprised we got a 5 so quickly, but maybe these 5 just stand out above the rest so much. I'm really, really interested that he's got such a strong body of work outside WrestleMania for a guy that is so defined by his WrestleMania appearances and his matches. Hopefully people, once he has retired, people won't sleep on everything else he did, because as we've sort of proved over the last hour and a half, there is so much depth, admittedly in a fairly short window. There's only 9 years between all the matches we've put on the list, but oh my gosh, what a 9 years, what a period. I'd urge people, as you sort of touched upon earlier, if you're thinking of voting and you're thinking of just going with one that you remember distinctly, for instance, Bad Blood probably being the most famous of these 5, do yourself a favor before you click the vote button. Just go and watch the rest if you've got time. It's only 5 matches, probably 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours in total time.
Max.
They're all on the WWE network. Get them watched. You really won't think of it wasted time.
No, I wouldn't think so. I think it's absolutely worth watching. I think the matches that you would put at the top of anyone's list, any top 5 match, if you had a wrestling career and these were your best 5 matches, you'd be very, very, very satisfied indeed. And this is without even touching WrestleMania. Even if we were doing a top 5 for WrestleMania, we won't, because it's a bit trite and easy, and the match with Shawn would win. But even then, trying to narrow it down to 5 would be hard, I think, at WrestleMania. You'd have the 2 with Shawn, you'd have Undertaker versus Triple H in the Cell. But after that, you go, does Orton get in there? Edge, Batista, CM Punk. The first match with Triple H. It would be hard just to get a 5 on the WrestleMania front.
Too right.
So fair play to Undertaker for everything, for the career, for WrestleMania, for these matches. And we will be celebrating that properly once again. I cannot plug this enough. Undertaker weekend at hookedonwrestling.co.uk. We have our Sunday night quiz is going to be an Undertaker special. For the first time, actually, you can do a bit of prep this week. You can do a bit of learning about Undertaker, learn some things. We may well be taking some questions from things that are on the site, so make sure you read up what's on the site and look within there. But you can actually do some prep on the topic. Normally, we spring it on you. So there's one thing. Like I said, the giveaway, don't forget you can win Undertaker mug, shirt. There's the giveaway that ends on Friday night, but there'll be more over the weekend, plus lots and lots of articles. And we've got a burgeoning team of writers here. And I've already seen some of the stuff that they've written, which will be gradually put up over the weekend, all about different takes on Undertaker's career. And it won't be people writing for 500 words going, Undertaker was good, wasn't he? I liked him when he wrestled Shawn. There'll be a little bit more to it than that. So plenty to think about all weekend as far as the Undertaker goes. Anything else to add on a website and plugging front, Paul, before I just let everyone know what we're going to be talking about next week?
No, just to remind you guys of the socials, we're on Facebook at facebook.com/hookedonwrestling. Same with Instagram, instagram.com/hookedonwrestling, and on Twitter at twitter.com/HO_wrestling. Or I suppose it's just at HO_wrestling if you're on Twitter already. So please do engage with us. We're getting a load of people, getting involved now. We've got the website. It's been a big success. What we've wanted to do is get people engaged much more of the year round rather than just our events. We had our biggest day ever, Rob, yesterday. Did you know that? We broke our record.
I didn't know that. Fantastic.
Yeah, we did. It was fantastic, phenomenal. So please carry on supporting the website. We really thank you for it so far. Make it part of your daily routine. And yeah, we look forward to speaking to you again next week. And enjoy Undertaker weekend. Enjoy all the stuff. Enjoy the last ride. I certainly will. I'll be there 3:00. Life stops for me at 3:00 on a Sunday at the moment. That takes priority, and it will this week as well, even though it's Father's Day.
Oh, is it Father's Day this weekend? Okay, cool. That's something else. That would have been a good theme for the quiz if it wasn't for the.
Wouldn't it?
We'll hold that back a week, so we might have a delayed Father's Day quiz.
Yeah, maybe.
And in fact, we have a delayed podcast because the original topic for this week was going to be something different, and then we worked out what was happening around Undertaker, and we just switched a few things around. So next week will be the topic that we were going to be doing this week. What it is, it's probably our most straightforward question. To date, it's the one that has a limited field. There's only a certain amount of people that we'll be able to talk about. But I do think it's an interesting debate. We will be talking about next week who is the best King of the Ring winner.
Yep.
And we can take that in lots of directions. Is it the best person that has won King of the Ring? Is it the best King of the Ring tournament itself? The best final? The most memorable? What it did for the person? All sorts of things. It won't just be a one-sided discussion. There's lots of ways we can take that. We will go through the history of King of the Ring. We will decide who it did the best for, who did the best with it. Next week, the best King of the Ring winner. So there's a small field to choose from. Over the coming few days, we will be putting that question to you on social media. I mean, you can get in touch with us first, of course, all the socials that Paul's just mentioned. But at some point, we will be putting the questions on Twitter, Facebook, etc. Please respond with who and indeed why. Give us a little bit more than just, I think it's, Owen Hart because ... And, give us some nice bits of feedback for us to think about. We will narrow that quite a small field down to 5 next week and give you another poll. And indeed, we will reveal the winners of this week's poll for the first time on the podcast. We always reveal it for the first time. So to find out if the match that you voted for as Undertaker's best non-WrestleMania match has won, the best thing to do is to download this podcast next week on your normal podcast app, or indeed try us out on YouTube. If you can see me waving, that's what you've done just now. So thank you for there's Paul waving as well. What a bonus that is that you can watch people waving on YouTube. But the reason we've done it is because we've heard that there's been lots of other podcasts that have got a lot of traffic through that. A lot of people prefer to use YouTube these days because of YouTube Premium and various other things. We're not pretending to you that we're bringing you an unbelievable show visually, but it's just if it helps you to listen to this, then that's all we can do, really. So we really appreciate it wherever you've come from. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support of the website. And please join us for Undertaker weekend. We can't wait to share that with you. But for now, from Paul Benson and myself, Rob McNichol, thank you very much for joining us on the How to Be Great podcast. And just remember, it's wrestling. Enjoy it. We'll see you very soon.